Hundreds of people gathered to mourn loved ones who were killed at the Nova Music Festival in southern Israel a year ago. That's when Hamas launched several attacks on Israel. Some relatives wailed at the site while others expressed messages of hope and resilience. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Jerusalem's mayor paid tribute to the fallen of Jerusalem. Both lit candles at the Iron Swords Monument that was erected in Jerusalem in honor of the victims. Here in the U.S., meantime, fences have been erected at the National Mall in Washington, D.C. ahead of rallies related to this somber date. Matt Bradley reports from Beirut, where the war has gotten worse rather than better.
Well, it's been 1 year since those deadly October 7th terror attacks sparked off this latest round of conflict that has now engulfed the entire region. Israel is, in earnest, now involved in the same kind of region-wide war that so many people throughout the Middle East had been dreading for the past year. That has now killed more than 40,000 people in the Gaza Strip, more than 1,000 Israelis, and now more than 2,000 Lebanese. It's set to kill even more if the Israelis decide to retaliate against an Iranian missile salvo from a couple of days ago that has essentially put the entire region on the precipice of a war that could really fall on the civilians both outside of Israel and the Gaza Strip and Lebanon. Now, meanwhile, we've been seeing commemorations and remembrances throughout Israel, especially in those kibbutzim and townships all around the Gaza Strip, but also in Tel Aviv in a place called Martyrs Square, which was basically a name that was christened by protesters who are demanding some sort of peace deal from Benjamin Netanyahu that would release those more than 100 remaining hostages inside the Gaza Strip. At the same time, there are so many reminders that this war is still going on. Hezbollah still firing missiles into northern Israel, where there were sirens that were sounded just in the past couple of moments. An Israeli bombardment that struck here, this neighborhood of Dahia, which is a Hezbollah stronghold, where last week Hassan Nasrallah was killed, the leader of Hezbollah, and there have been successive, massive bombardments by the Israelis targeting that neighborhood, which is a residential area for the most part. Now, at the same time, we're still waiting to see whether the Israelis are going to retaliate or how they will retaliate against that Iranian missile salvo. So on this 1 year anniversary, there are somber reminders that the situation in the wider Middle East has gotten worse rather than better. Matt Bradley, NBC News, Beirut, Lebanon.
Meantime, people around the world are honoring those killed during that attack on the music festival in Israel. There are local services planned today, including one at Chabad of Durham in Chapel Hill. A local rabbi shares the significance of these services in our next half hour.
Well, on the eve of the October 7th anniversary, the Israeli military is stepping up its operations in Gaza once again. For the fourth time over the course of the last year, the Israeli military now beginning to carry out another major offensive in northern Gaza in the Jabalia refugee camp after it says that Hamas militants have begun to regroup there. It is just the latest instance of the Israeli military being forced to go back into areas that it had previously carried out an offensive in, which it said it had cleared, but then Hamas rebuilt. Speaking, of course, to major questions about Israel's long-term strategy in Gaza and the lack of an alternative to Hamas governance inside the Gaza Strip. Overnight, the Israeli military striking more than a dozen targets in Jabalia from the air as well as from artillery strikes to prepare the ground for Israeli infantry troops to move in. As it is doing so, it is also once again forcing the displacement of thousands of Palestinians living in northern Gaza. Hundreds have already begun to flee the area of Jabalia, expressing concerns about what they will find in these humanitarian zones, which have been struck themselves as they head to those areas. But the Israeli military has actually now issued evacuation orders for the majority of the northern part of the Gaza Strip, where hundreds of thousands of people are currently believed to be living. And so major impacts to this. And just another reminder that as we are now approaching this 1 year anniversary of the October 7th massacre, a year of the war in Gaza, the fighting in Gaza very much still continuing. Hamas, while it may have been defeated as a military structure, as the Israeli military has said, very much still fighting as a guerrilla force, as the Qassam brigades, Hamas's military wing, saying that they are engaged in fierce fighting with Israeli troops in northern Gaza. As all of this is happening, of course, the Israeli military is also stepping up its military offensive in Lebanon, where ground troops are also now engaged there as well, issuing additional evacuation orders for Lebanese villages in southern Lebanon, raising questions about how much more that operation will expand. And in addition to that, of course, we're still waiting for the Israeli retaliation for that barrage of ballistic missiles fired by Iran earlier this week. The Israeli government vowing it will retaliate, but we don't yet know when or how severe that retaliation will be.